So I think we'll get started. Are all roles in the military open to women? Well, that's a relatively easy question. The answer to that is yes, all roles in the military are open to women now. Of course, they weren't always, but in recent years, the rules have changed, and it means that women can literally do any job in the military. What's the biggest gender stereotype or myth about serving in the army? I think there is a perception that the army is all about big guns, big packs, and being on the front line. And that if you're a woman, you've somehow got to be big and butch and manly. And I absolutely disagree with that, because you can be fit, strong, robust, disciplined, and hard as nails. But you can also be a woman, and you can also have empathy, and you can also bring to the fore the values that women have that men don't necessarily have. And that means that those values and those behaviours are complementary between men and women, and it makes for a much more productive, I think, environment. Okay, next question. Who inspires you? Well, there are lots of public figures I could think of who inspire me, but really, at the risk of sounding cliche, I would have to say my mum. Because of my father's job at the time, just up sticks and moved to Japan with 4 children under the age of 8. She sacrificed her opportunities professionally, temporarily at least, for this, but she took us across to Japan when there was no internet, no mobile phones, no help, nobody spoke English, everything was written in Japanese. And she made a life for us, and she gave us incredible opportunities, cultural, educational, and opened our eyes to the world. And she went back to work after, when we were old enough, and made an incredibly successful career, second career, after children. And so what inspires me there is that you can be a woman and a mother and professional. And my gosh, if you've got that kind of grit and resilience, then you can achieve almost anything. And that's really inspiring for me. Personally speaking, what's the biggest challenge that remains to be overcome in the army? The army is an institution that has history, that has ceremony, and it has this mythical sort of status and aura about it. And I think one of the biggest challenges today is for us to relate better to the society in which we live, and for us to get more integrated into the public sort of consciousness, and to be more approachable. Everything's far less formal now. And I think we need to, whilst remaining disciplined and an institution that has to defend the country and fight wars, I think we need to be more approachable and engage better with the society in which we live. And we'll be a much more successful army for it, I think. Ooh, if you could go back in time and offer yourself advice when you joined, what would you say? The army is an institution which has discipline and a fairly sort of defined career path and career managers. You know, when you join, you kind of get swept up in this. That's where you go. That's your next job. And you have expectations that you're just going to move with the flow, and you will move forward in the way that everybody else has moved forward before you. I think the piece of advice I would give myself is that's not how it has to be. You can shape your own path and you can shape your own career, and you need to, so that you get as much out of the army as the army gets out of you. We'll move on to another one. What does International Women's Day mean to you? A really interesting one. I think International Women's Day, it's great that there is a day where we actually mark the value and the unique sort of nature of women. And so it is an opportunity to highlight the importance of equality and constantly fighting for that equality. But I think more important is that it isn't just one day in the year. International Women's Day is a representation of what we should be doing every single day of the year. And that's not just about women, it's about the whole of society. Talk us through 3 of your proudest moments in uniform. One of my proudest moments in uniform has to be the day I commissioned and as an officer. That was after the best part of the year, going through some fairly tough times at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. And it all culminates with this huge parade with a big band, and we're all marching around in our, polished and ironed uniforms, with family and friends all sitting in the audience, and a real sort of humbling but also very, very proud moment. Another proud moment when after all the training that you do and all the expectations about going on an operational tour, I found myself deploying to Iraq in charge of a combat camera team. So I had a photographer and a videographer, and I was charged with getting the stories, and we went out with all the different units on patrol to raids to, across the area of operations. And I remember the first time I came under enemy fire, or what we call it, effective enemy fire. So we were being shot at. And I remember my reaction being to hit the deck, look up, look for where the shots were coming from, and get ready to fire back, which is exactly what you're taught to do and which you're drilled to do time and time again in training. And the reason that always sticks in my mind is that you never quite know how you're going to react when it really happens. And so I was really proud and rather relieved that I did, my drills and my training came into play. And I didn't run away, I didn't scream, I just did the job at hand. Another moment that well, it's not so much a moment really, but an element of pride for me is being able to support and nurture other people's careers, sometimes in a way that maybe, wasn't done for you. And I think that for me, it's a really proud moment when I've helped to pave the way for somebody else to get where they want to be and to be able to bring their aspirations to fruition. Why did you join the army? That's a really good question. I'd love to say that my family are all army. None of my family were in the army. We had no connection to it at all. I went to university to study law and French law. I was a professional dancer before that, so no connection to the army whatsoever, until by complete chance I discovered the University Officer Training Corps, and it was so much fun. I love sports, I love being outdoors. I met an amazing sort of array of people, huge camaraderie. We did sports I'd never even tried before. We travelled and we were outside getting dirty and being taught new skills, and it was just brilliant. And after 2-3 years in the Officer Training Corps, it was a natural progression somehow to go and go through selection to go to the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst and to go and join the army full time. I was part of the regular army after that for 5 years, and I left and retrained in a civilian career, but I couldn't stay away. For the same reasons that I joined the Officer Training Corps, I couldn't stay away from the army as a whole, and so I found the perfect balance really. I'm now an army reservist, and I've been in the army reserves for 15 odd years, and overall across the army for over 20 years, and best decision I ever made. What's the biggest change you've experienced in the past 20 years? I think really focusing on the Army Reserve, huge changes really, because it used to be the Territorial Army, and it was very much this sort of part-time side gig that people would talk about as people had a hobby, they were in the Territorial Army. Now clearly that wasn't quite accurate, but it's certainly a very, very different Army Reserve now to what the Territorial Army was before. It's extremely professional. It's an integral part of the army as a whole and the armed forces, and has a very, very real job to do, both at home and on operations. What can we all do to help accelerate action and achieve greater gender equality and parity? Of course, this is the theme for International Women's Day 2025. I think it's really, really important that this isn't just one day, actually. Whatever action we are taking needs to be taken every single day, and not just by women, but by everybody, to make sure that we grow as a society. And in order to do that, I think the most important action to take is, rather than thinking men, women, different genders, it's really thinking about, well, what strengths, weaknesses, what skills have people got, what kind of qualities and behaviours have people got, and how can they add value to a situation, to a job, to a team. And it's looking at it in that context rather than the context of gender. I think that would be the most constructive approach. Right. What did you hope to achieve when you first joined? I would love to be able to say that I had a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan, but that's just not the case. It was so unexpected. I had never planned to join the army. I'd never really sort of considered it as part of career options. And so once I commissioned as an officer, I wanted to have as many challenges, opportunities as possible, and as many adventures as possible. And I hadn't really thought about where that career might take me, or how long I might be in the army, whether it was regular or army reserve. But there was also a key piece now with hindsight, And again, it may sound idealistic, but there was a key piece about service, about wanting to make a difference, about doing something that felt like it was worthwhile. If you could make one change to the army, what would it be? I might go into sort of slightly two changes, but the first, I think particularly on International Women's Day, is that we've come a long way in equality and being aware of gender issues and resolving them, but we've got so much more that we need to do. I think more generally, though, the army, and in particular the Army Reserves, is not necessarily very well understood, and therefore maybe doesn't get the support that it could have from local communities, society as a whole. And I think that's really the onus is on us within the army, and particularly the Army Reserve, to make sure that we're reaching out and that people actually understand what it is we do and why it's really important that we carry on doing it and that we are supported in doing it, particularly in the global climate we live in today. The more understanding we have from the population at large and the more support we have, the more able we're going to be able to actually protect our country and, if necessary, fight for it.